Good afternoon, everyone. We're back here. I'm here with Lance Conley. We're doing another podcast. We did one last night with Sam Frost. It was actually a pretty good one. It's talking about the Gary DeMar controversy and everything relating to his, his response to the three questions that these Presbyterian ministers posed to him. They're trying to get his ideas on eschatology. We got a different guest tonight. His name is Pastor Anthony Aquino. He's actually, I know him from Don Preston's YouTube channel. We used to have some interactions on that channel. He was in the trenches just like I was. We were fighting the hyper-preterist heretics. We were engaging in apologetics. We were arguing sometimes with people who didn't want to listen, but what's new about that? Anyways, we got Anthony here, and how's it going, Anthony?
It's going really good. Yeah, so I'm the pastor of Cal Island Baptist Church here in Corpus Christi. We're celebrating our 150th anniversary next year, so 3 Jubilees, and just excited to be ministering down here and to be able to do some apologetics online. And so that's it.
So
I'm accused of being Lance Conley there for a while.
Yeah.
There's actually some backstory to that. And like I was telling you guys earlier, that you were actually accused, Anthony, of being Lance Conley, along with myself and a few others. A number of people got banned from Don's YouTube forum because a guy named Colin, some guy from South Africa, he's a Holocaust denier. He's got some Nazi leanings. He actually accused you, as well as a bunch of other people, of being Lance Conley. So I didn't know who Lance Conley was. So I said, well, who's Lance Conley? Anyways, I did some research, found Lance Conley. We struck up a conversation. Eventually, we started doing these podcasts, but it was kind of interesting because I told Colin, I said, your false accusations have actually gotten a number of persons, including a minister of the gospel, banned from, open dialogue, from open, discussion, which is what, America's built on. Those principles of free speech. So I thought it was pretty egregious, but thanks for coming on. And I know, Lance, you wanted to ask some questions, so I'm gonna let you go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I mean, what got you involved with full preterism? Let's go on to that for a little second here.
That's a good question. I'm trying to think how. I'm not sure. I can't exactly remember, but I was just swallowed up in it. I think I heard a debate. Anyways, I have a friend in Weatherford, Texas, that goes to a Church of Christ. And he had kind of told me some things about somebody who'd come in and started teaching some stuff and asking the guy had got some meetings with the pastor or the elder there. And so that he's a good friend of mine. He's a real good friend of mine. And so I said, well, what was he teaching? And he kind of told me, I'm like, what is he talking about? So I'm seeing, and I've saw some other things online that seem to give indication that this is growing, maybe not by leaps and bounds, but it is something that needs to be answered. And again, with my friend's situation. And so I entered into the PhD program at Southwestern Baptist Seminary. And so as I was doing, I was kind of studying, like, what am I going to write a thesis on? And so this was happening at the same time. And so I started really researching it to see if it's possibly that I could write a thesis about that. So, and the more I learned about it, the more I thought, this is, how could anyone believe this? And
right.
And so I thought to myself, I'm going to help some people out, some people that are sort of trapped in this idea. That's what I honestly thought. I would, give them some information, offer to share some things from the scripture with them, and see them sort of set free from it. But man, there were some people that were just, just almost verbally violent. Like I said, I got called Lance Conley. I'm like, I don't know. I bought your book, by the way. So I
got my book.
I did. I bought it off of Amazon, the ebook.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How'd you like it? Or have you finished it? Or
I liked it. It was very helpful. I know Don reviewed it. And he had terrible things to say about it.
Oh,
so, yeah. But I very much liked it. And I thought, hey, he said that you were Don even on air, I think. Or anyways, he commented something about there was Lance Conley or acting like Lance Conley. I'm like, I got to find out who this guy is.
Man.
Yeah. So
everybody wants to find out who you are, Lance.
Well, I'm glad to hear like real life that my book is actually like helping people. Because me and Sam,
that was great.
yeah, me and Frost, like when I worked on it, I was like, I'm Eastern Orthodox, by the way, but like,
yeah, I know that.
Like I put it together and I was like, I'm going to try to make a book with Frost that we're going to try to make something that like anybody can read this and they're not going to be like, oh no, Lance is Eastern Orthodox, so since I'm Baptist, I can't agree with him on any of it.
I mean, there's some areas that I would disagree with because we have different views, but in regards to full preterism, and I thought it was very helpful. And he, so I didn't realize that Frost, he added the appendix, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that? Yeah. So, but I thought it was a well-written book. I know Don had said some things about some grammar issues or whatever, but well, I mean, if that's what you're picking on, you know.
Yeah, if you notice when he's got like at least 120 videos now that are like on a playlist of like how to defeat Lance Conley or something.
Yeah.
Every single one of them that actually addresses me, none of them have a single refutation. There's not a single one. All it is like Lance Conley is a vile human being and I hate him. And Lance Conley is mean. He's rude. Like, okay, whatever. Like, that's not an argument, you know?
Yeah. Right.
Master of the ad hominem, Don Preston.
Yeah. It's dishonesty. But hey, you know, I guess it's a badge of honor if you're getting accused of being me, I guess. I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Well, like I said, I looked it up and the book was very helpful. I thought it was very clear. Your testimony was very, was clear, and it was I would recommend it to anyone. I mean, certainly in regards to the answering full preterism, certainly people that are sort of new to it, maybe they've been just recently taken in by it, that's the book I would point them to. And I thought Sam Frost, his appendix was very helpful too, very helpful. So the book is great book. I will say that you had said I'm sorry, what was your name, sir? The other gentleman? Yes,
I'm Brian.
Is it, or Mr. Pastor? What should I call you?
You call me Brian.
Brian? Okay. Yeah. You had said that someone had said something about denying the Holocaust. This guy. Yeah, there is a strand of full preterism that lends itself towards that type of. I don't like going around accusing people of being whatever, anti-Semitic or whatever, but there is a strand of that. And I pointed that out to Don, and I sent him a clip of one of their conferences where one of the speakers there was talking about how the protocols of the Elder Zion, I mean, all this stuff. And I said, this guy's endorsing it, Don. He's like, no one's ever endorsed that at my conference. Right. So I sent him an audio of it, and Don never responded. So,
well, the way I, within my experiences, there is that, like you said, there's that set or subset of people that take like a hard Jewish approach where they almost, begin to teach that, or outright teach that, the second coming is really just nothing more than a mission of ethnic cleansing, really.
Oh, really?
That's to me. So it's like an ethnic cleansing motif, and they weave it throughout, the narrative of the Old Testament and the New. Wherever Don sees, the day of the Lord, he sees Israel being destroyed. He sees, he reads it into every passage where, almost every eschatological passage. He doesn't honor the text. He doesn't want to see what the text says about, these passages. He reads this ethnic cleansing narrative into that.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating. And of course, his followers, they pick up on it and then they blow it out of proportion. And it just it goes downhill from there. I've got people, who routinely reach out to me, with flat earth, with their flat earth arguments and their Holocaust denial arguments. And it's really just one mess of conspiracy theories, one theory after another. It's really, a lot of kookiness over there.
Well, I'll also say that when I was a full preterist for 5 years, there was definitely that in full preterism. Don even quotes, Don has never been able to find this quote for me, but he quotes from this one encyclopedia. And the only spot that I've ever found this quotation that he gave me was from a white supremacist site. So I think that he will lie about it, but I don't think that he ever actually looked up the actual encyclopedia. I think he just went online, found something, and then was like, oh, that sounds good. I'm going to put this on here. And I'm curious, the guy that you were talking about, that was spouting the Elders of Protocol, was it perhaps William Bell? Because
it was William Bell.
I figured it was because William Bell has a whole entire book online about how he loves this. I can't remember his name at the moment, but he loves this one guy that was like, oh, I hate Israel because blah 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 blah, right? And it's like
William Bell.
Yeah, it was William Bell.
I had the audio quote. I was afraid Don would take it down, but I recorded it. And yeah, you're exactly right. That was William Bell.
I figured it was. William Bell's been promoting polygamy now and like racism.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
With the Hebrew Israelites.
Yeah. It's pretty bizarre. He's like, it's funny you bring that up. I don't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. No, you're good. Go ahead.
But there is a connection there in regards to the another person that I've run across that I've had some conversation with, actually in regards to you, was a guy named Jason
DaCosta.
DaCosta. Okay. So his argument that it leads to Israel only is, I think he's right. Mm-hmm. I think he makes a great point. So I was actually talking with him and trying to make sure I was connecting all the dots, because he makes a good point. And I don't agree with him by any means, but he makes the same case that the Hebrew Israelites make oftentimes. And he's actually posted some of their stuff on his site, showing how Cornelius was, the argument that Cornelius was actually African-American. Anyways, so there's a strange connection with all that. So it doesn't surprise me that William Bell starting to adopt some of that. But can I ask you guys a couple of questions?
Sure.
So how did, and I've read your book, but how did you get into the full preterism? I don't exactly remember it now from your book, but how did it happen? Were you?
I'll let Brian go first, and then I'll answer, because mine's gonna be a long answer.
Well, I can answer you briefly, Anthony. I was actually in the Baptist. I've been in the Baptist church for 18 years. I've been in the ministry now for I've been in the Baptist church for about 20 years, and I've been a minister for almost 18 years.
Okay.
What happened is around, I think it was 2005, I started to explore the doctrines of preterism. I did not have a lot of doctrinal grounding. So, my soteriology was fine, but my eschatology, I was very unsettled. And so I started reading some of the more classical writers, Reformed people like John Gill, John Lightfoot. And so I picked up on these concepts of AD 70 fulfillment, read some of Philip Morrow's books, ended up reading J. Stuart Russell, his book on the parousia, written in I think it was 1878, classic of the genre. Anyways, I segued into more and more into a 5-point Calvinism at the same time. So the Calvinism was actually helping me out, accept some of these spiritualizing, interpretive models. And eventually I partnered with a guy named Joe V. Thomas. He was an elderly pastor. He pastored a church called Pensacola Orthodox Baptist Preterist Assembly in Pensacola, Florida. He was a 5-point Calvinist and a full preterist. And under his ministry, I became a full preterist. The irony is that that's the same church that Ward Fenley got his start from. I don't know if you know who Ward Fenley is.
Yeah, I know Ward.
Yeah, so he sat under Joe's ministry as well. And I accepted, full preterism. I started moving around the Baptist churches. There was a few of them in the Deep South that were full preterists. They've all pretty much, closed down by now. But I was in the full preterism movement for about 15 months. And then afterwards, what I did was I studied myself into it and then studied myself out of it. So I never bought into the whole way of life. But it was just a phase, and I worked myself out of it, rehabilitated myself, ended up.
That's amazing.
But that's my story in a nutshell. Okay.
I wish I could say it was a phase, but it kind of was. But like 5 years of a phase, that's kind of that's insane, right? No,
that's not terribly long. I mean,
I guess it was. It should have been.
A good book came out of it. So
yeah, that's true. So I actually. When I first took Christianity seriously, started reading the Bible, started doing all that, I was 17, and I think I was premillennial just by I don't know,
now I am, just so you know.
Yeah. I'm premillennial. Well, and I got no problem with that, by the way. I think I was historic premillennial for maybe 6 months, while I was just kind of like that by default. And then I was studying it more. I was very Calvinist, so like I read R.C. Sproul pretty much immediately, and like this was like back when they were like really huge. The neo-reform movement was like very, very heavy in the Baptist communities and everything, right? So like R.C. Sproul Sr., he had wrote all these eschatology books, and I was very interested in it. So I pretty much just became a partial preterist, and I was that from like the start pretty much. And eventually like some of my friends would like, they were trying to get me into a Bible study, and I eventually joined them. But first they got me on Daniel, and then they gave me the preterist arguments, and I was like, okay, that makes sort of sense. But then they started showing me like full preterist videos and stuff like that. And so I started going, well, okay, I don't think this is right just yet. But then like slowly I started to see like some flaws with the way that I viewed partial preterism at the time. So I went full preterist, and well, I started to talk to some of the people like Don Preston. Like I tried to get in contact with Max King and stuff, but it just never happened much. But I did read him though. I read all those people. That's why they really loved me. They were like, man, he knows his stuff, you know. Now they tell me that I don't know anything, but back then they were like inviting me to come to conferences, all this other stuff, and I couldn't go because I was trying to finish college. But like I read Ed Stevens, I read all of them, and like I know them pretty much back and forth, left and right, you know. Okay. But yeah, so I eventually, like around 2015-ish, like I had a faith crisis because I got into a debate with an IO person, Rivers of Eden.
Oh yeah, I know. Okay.
Yeah, and he pretty much just like he whooped me. I mean, I'll be honest.
Well, yeah, I mean,
he was like, well, how can you be part of the elect if you know the elect were elected in 70 AD? And I'm like, okay, you know, shoot, you've got a good point there. So I had a bit of a faith crisis for about a year. Probably not the best thing for a youth pastor at the time, but but I mean, I still like taught the Bible, taught the kids, like.
Well, that brings up a question. Can I stop you and ask you something?
Okay, go ahead.
Because I can never get a straight answer. I can never get a straight answer out of Don. We had some private email conversation. And I've seen his response videos to Jason DaCosta. Again, Don should be a lawyer, man, because he can just get around the issue and stay. I mean, he never answers the topic at hand. How does Don deal with the fullness of the Gentiles and come in? I mean, I know he says like it's a balance or something, but clearly it says until the fullness of the Gentiles. There's an end point there, and it seems to flow well with IO. What does he say is left after 80-70? I mean, are we still sharing the gospel? He can't tell me that. So what does he say?
From what I remember, and I've had a lot of interactions with Don via, YouTube comments. If I recall correctly, he said something to the effect of that fullness of the Gentiles. It was not a numeric fullness. It was, I forget his actual terminology, but yes, not numeric. It's more of like a fullness of divine purpose being consummated. That's how he phrased it to me.
Okay.
I actually had a debate with Don. My only actual like written debate that he agreed to do with me, where he got his butt handed to him about Romans 11. But so I can send that to you later if you want to see that.
Okay, yeah.
The truth is he doesn't actually have an answer. He just pulls stuff out of his rear end, and it's pretty much like if an IO person gives an argument, like he is going to dismiss it left and right
and shut him down.
He's just block him. Like it's basically, I want to sell books. I don't give a crap about anything. Like you've got a problem, like whatever. I don't care. Yeah. Like, and I confront them about this as a full preterist quite a few times. I'd be like, Don, how do we answer for this? Because this seems like it could be a problem. Yeah. Like our theology should be able to like apply to life. And
exactly.
Don's doesn't. It's just
right.
him.
That's why I got Jason DaCosta. I felt bad for him. So I'm like, listen, I think that you're correct in sort of some of the the conclusions that you're drawing. But let's back up a little bit and see if I can, because I mean, the guy, I understand he was on fire, and then all of a sudden he's pretty much left the faith because of it. But well, can I just tell you guys? I don't know, I've got to be done here at 5. Can I tell you kind of how I got Don to start responding and agree? So I'm premillennial, and so I was hearing all these comments about, can God tell time, and so there's those time statements, and so what I began to do is I said, well, I'm gonna start questioning Don and others in regards to the millennium, because eventually Don, he came out and said that the millennium was the 40 years between 80-30 and 80-70. So what I started to say is, listen, you guys can't tell time. Now I understand the millennium to be a literal 1,000 years, but even if you don't, no one ever has understood it to be 40 years. So, because that was his first response to me was, well, it's not literal. I said, hey, that's fine if you want to take it to be a really long time, but Don, 1,000 never means 40. And so he started responding, and finally he started giving me this idea of it being qualitative. So it says it shall come to life, reign for 1,000 years, that it was qualitative. And because I was really hitting, I said, you guys can't answer these time statements. Look at this plain time statement. You press others on time statements. What about this time statement? You can't tell time either. And that's what eventually, because I called him out so much, I think maybe on this public forums, that he secretly emailed me and said, all right, let's do a debate about it. He says it's going to be the first millennium debate, and so you better be ready, and I'm going to send you 20 questions. So it's still in the works, but am I right? He would say that the millennial is the 40 years before 80-70, right?
87.
Yeah. So he,
it's not even 40 years, really. It's got to be like 37 years, because it's got to be enough time for that apostasy that well, it depends how long you make it. If you make it the length of the Jewish war, which would have been approximately 3.5 years, it makes the millennium a 37-year period. So you figure, okay, millennium, then the apostasy, which was, I guess, lasted the duration of the Jewish war, and then boom, you've got Christ coming and to destroy Israel, and then that's it. Purposes of God are fulfilled. The wrath of God has been already poured out. The Gentiles have been saved. Everybody's, singing a happy song, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Lance. I'm sorry.
Like, as you've read in my book, like his biggest problem is he copied Max King, like almost like ad verbatim. Like his only difference between Max King is that he has Jesus destroying his body in the ascension, and like, like that. And what else? Like that, basically, like, and Jesus is God. That's his. He actually accepts the Trinity, so that's good.
So,
but
Max King doesn't.
No, Max King was a Unitarian and Universalist, and Don was going to be a Universalist, but then he thought, oh no, my book sales are going down because I've been talking about Universalism. Oh no. So then he stopped, and like now he doesn't give you a straight answer about it. Just kind of like Romans 11 and everything else that somebody asked him. Because
that's it brings up another thing in regards to the body of Christ. That's an ancient heresy. I found I don't have the quote on hand, but there was an ancient early church era Gnostic sect that taught clearly exact same thing, that Jesus ascended and he didn't have his bodily, he lost his body at that point. And I'm like, this is exactly what Don's teaching, because he says that it burned up, right?
Right.
He's forced to say that. Now, but Max King, did he teach that?
No, he just never brought it up or anything. I don't think he taught that. Like, I've never read anything from him about that. So, but then again, Max King went completely like in a totally different direction. He went like New Age, like he didn't give us not about all that afterwards.
Okay. Yeah. So some of the other points that I put out to Don is that, look, if 1,000 can actually mean 40, then why can't a short time mean 2,000 years? I mean, if it's all qualitative, why can't this be qualitative? Why are you stressing on this? So some of that kind of arguments, I don't think he'd heard necessarily. Maybe he had, but maybe not recently. that I think caused him to, well, I need to respond to this guy. So yeah, I kind of used the same language. Here's some time statements. What do you do with this? And he takes in Revelation 6:11, where it says that the souls of them that were beheaded and how long the Lord, and they were told to rest a little while. He takes that to be the time of the millennium, the resting a little while. So I said, well, here's language. A little while can also be describing the same period that's called 1,000 years. So that's a time statement. I mean, come on,
Right.
these are flexible. Why can't these be flexible? So that's kind of what got me into the debate with him.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be good. It'll be good if you can actually get into a debate with him, because he might actually have to be forced to answer something for once.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I've got his questions. I wonder if that would be prudent to. I could just share with you. I don't, that may not be right to do. I don't know. I wouldn't care if you shared mine, but
you could paraphrase them. You could paraphrase them, or just condense them, just to give us the general gist of what it is that he's asking you.
Oh, let me grab my phone real quick.
okay. Well, at least we've proven too that Anthony is definitely not Lance Conley.
That's right. Neither am I, Lance. I'm not Lance Conley either.
Yeah. So Don, if you're listening, I'm sorry, that's not going to work this time, buddy.
Or in
Colin,
the spirit of Lance Conley,
By
man.
the
He
way,
was-
Colin, I'm sorry for calling Colin a Nazi too. I don't know if he's a Nazi, but he just acts like it.
Okay. I think he probably is, but okay.
Oh,
Taking the benefit of the doubt. I don't want
Sure.
to make any accusations, but
Yeah.
Yeah, and I talked to Sam. We've had some good conversation. He was helping me prep for the debate. Let's see. Yeah, so here's the questions that I had for him. Was the body that Thomas touched, because I want to be very specific, was the body that Thomas touched burned to the point of ash and disintegration? Yes or no, please. If yes, where are these ashes? In what realm might they exist? Heaven or somewhere scattered around the earthly realm? So literally, what happened to it? I mean,
Right.
is it somewhere around here? I mean, so let's see.
One thing he'll say.
His answer to me was, see Hedges rule number 3, to which you agreed. This has no relevance to the proposition.
No
So,
relevance.
yeah, he didn't
That's
answer
a
that
Don
one.
Preston response.
Really?
So, and my second question was, and again, I don't know your views on the creation week, but if he can read a billion years into the Genesis account where it says day one, okay, well, why can't, again, that's another flexible time statement. So let's see. Well, number 3, where in scripture is it stated 1,000 years can function as a much smaller number, such as 37? So yeah, you're right, 37. Is there any remote indication this could be possible? And his answer was 2 Peter 3:8, 1,000 years is as a day. So I mean, to God, obviously, that's what Peter says, but let's see. And then he answered with Hedges rule number 3. It's not relevant. Let's see. Oh, I said, why would the Holy Spirit be powerless to press upon anyone the truth regarding your doctrine, as well as empower a record be left of such belief? John 16:13. So why do we not see anyone teaching this until, I think the earliest I've found clearly is maybe 1813 or something.
Yeah, the first full preterist is 18. What is it, Brian? It's like 1830.
1840. Well, 1845 is when the first full preterist book was written, but now
Right.
there's some fuller preterism trickling in from the early 1800s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But certainly not before that. I mean, not of record. So
Nope, not
Right.
that we found.
Robert Townley is the first
Yeah.
documented full preterist, and he actually goes to say that we don't have to pray anymore because God's gifts have already ceased. So prayer's a gift.
now-
So
wouldn't Robert Townley, didn't he still have, no, he had a millennium that started, his millennium was really weird.
This millennium
like-
was the 40 years as well. It's the apostolic age was the
Okay.
millennium to him. But now there was a universalist named Hosea Ballou who actually, he was like probably what you would call like a 95% full preterist, but he wasn't he didn't systematize his approach. So it's really he's kind of all over the place. but his interpretation of that sheep and the goats judgment in Matthew chapter 25, he distinctly says in his notes on the parables, which was published in the early 1800s, I think 1804 was the first edition, he distinctly states that that judgment was fulfilled in AD 70. So that pretty much makes him a full preterist, right?
Okay.
I'll just
Let me just see if there's a few more here that most of them are answered. C. Hedges Rule 3. I mean, questions 6 through 8. No, he won't answer. Question 8, Hedges Rule.
What is this Hedges Rule? Is this
so? I agreed to the rules of debate. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah,
so
every single debate that he does, he tries to put out. I can't remember his name. Hodges or Hedges, and actually, when I did my second debate under my pseudonym Sergius Bale, I used those exact things, and he got so mad because like I quoted them ad verbatim, and like he couldn't respond to any of it. And half the time he doesn't actually answer some of the questions, and then he gets mad that, oh, like you haven't answered this. It's like, well, you haven't answered this, Don. Like, come on, dude. Like he's very like, it's very dishonest. It's a very dishonest tactic, honestly.
Yeah. So 2 more questions I think you might be interested in. I said, if the Holy Spirit wanted to communicate an actual time span of 1,000 years in Revelation 20, and again, my ongoing point with him was, okay, if at least 1,000 years. Okay. So in Revelation 20, how should it have been stated? If he wanted to communicate that, what else could he have told you? And he said basically he used the language that would need to be used, but just not put in the book of Revelation because it's a highly metaphorical book. Okay. So there's no way he could have convinced you that it wasn't 40 in essence. And then one more question here that you may, let's see. I said, what exegetical identifiers should one look for when determining if a verse refers to Satan as normally understood or the Jews? Because I don't know if you realize he takes Romans, I think it's Romans 13, where the enemy or Satan will soon be crushed, or these are referring to the Jews. So whenever you see Satan, I don't know if this is a new doctrine of his. If it sounded like it was a shift.
It's Robert Townley's doctrine. Satan is the Jews. That's really? That's what he wrote in his book.
Well, and Don started to change it now to where like it used to be, he used to have it differently, but now he says that Satan is the old covenant and Satan is Jews. And like, I mean, he's just going now like Satan is the old covenant because it was the accuser. And it's like, that's not what Torah was about at all, dude. Yeah. Like,
so does he believe in a like a Satan? Like,
I don't know anymore because I've tried to get this out of him and he would refuse to answer. So, he's not going to answer sometimes. He's going to be like, oh, this means this. And, like he's not going to answer it.
Okay. So and see, that's the thing about full preterism is that it's like an acid that just eventually eats away at. And that's actually what I think Paul was saying when he said, Hymenaeus and Philetus, that it's a cancer.
Right.
And it just literally every doctrine begins to eventually fall. And so let me see, maybe just one more here. I said, aside from the mathematical reality that 1,000 is the cube of 10, what specifically in your view does it correspond to the constituent elements of Revelation 20? So he says that because 10 times 10 times 10 is 1,000, it's a perfect cube. And so what I was asking him was, okay, all right, so that mathematical reality, how does that fit with Revelation 20? And there's something else too, is that he says that the millennium started, I believe he says, whenever Jesus first cast out a demon, because that's the binding of Satan. And so I'm like, so Jesus Christ was crucified while Satan was bound up and chained, and I mean, Paul was beheaded while Satan was not on the earth. And I mean, come on.
Everything and I've noticed this. It's just like, I don't know if it's that he's not done apologetics at all or whatever. I don't know. It's just like, it seems like he's just falling apart more and more as time goes on, obviously. Like, and that happens to all of us, but like, sure. It just seems like it seems like a guy that does this so much. But I don't know that he does ever think about it, because all he does is put videos about 70 AD. It does, like, he's got like, how many is it? 800 videos of this is Matthew 24 and this is
Matthew 24. Yeah.
yeah, like, okay, we get it. Like, we get it, dude. You've done Matthew 24 and 25 for 800 episodes. How about you?
Right.
How about you tell us like how this all applies to our life or something?
Yeah. Now, what would he say about that? How would you apply? I mean, because technically speaking, you guys can tell me if I'm wrong. The New Testament letters, does he think that any of them, like, what information in those? He's almost like the most hyper dispensationalist ever. But
because he is.
Apply to us? I mean,
he's going to say that
for help here. So, because I'm trying, this is kind of debate preparation for me. So,
yeah,
how would they apply that?
Like, he is going to argue that it applies to him. Like, he's going to say that, yeah, I'm still part of the elect somehow. Like, he won't ever explain how, but he's going to say like, yeah, I'm part of the elect and I'm part of salvation. And it's like, okay, like, and he's not going to explain how. Like, he never does, because he's got a contradictory view. He knows it's contradictory, by the way.
Does he believe in baptism still?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe somebody can ask him and he will answer, but I doubt he will, because he doesn't answer anything. He just, his whole deal is, and he knows this. Like, I'm telling you, he knows this. Like, he knows, like, this is his game. Like, he's just trying to sell books, trying to make money, not answer questions, keep up the cult going so that they'll buy his new books. Because if you have about 6,000 followers and you sell a book for $10, well, you got 60,000 right there or whatever.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah.
So he was actually asked that in a debate with, it was a Presbyterian minister. I can't think of his name now, but towards the end of the debate during the cross, the guy, I don't want to say anything, but he didn't do a really good job of it. But one of the questions he asked was really good. He said, so if it's all finished, I mean, do you not baptize anymore? Do you still? And Don essentially said the same thing. It's not part of the debate. You're trying to pit me against the moderator.
Yeah.
And he didn't answer. And I was going, oh man, because Don being Church of Christ, you would think that he would be, have to say, yes, I still baptize, but he wouldn't answer him. And so I'm assuming that he doesn't, he doesn't go to church anymore.
He probably doesn't, honestly. I can't say for sure, but if the gifts have ceased and baptism is a gift, like it, I mean, even Baptists, y'all think, because I was a Baptist, it's a sacrament, right? So,
what about taking the Lord's Supper? Shouldn't that be finished?
I know.
You do this until Paul says, do this, you proclaim the Lord's death till he comes. So if he's already come, we shouldn't be taking the Lord's Supper anymore. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's probably true. Like, all the sacraments there's no need for them because Christ has already come. So there's no more. Why would we
have a memorial for it? So Don said, he was pressed on that one time, and he said, well, it says until, but that doesn't mean that we can't still take it. Because I know he didn't want to say that what the implications of his view would be was to stop it, So, well, that's really good. No, and I know, Eastern Orthodox, hey, you guys got baptism, right? It's full immersion.
Oh, yeah. Yep. We dunk our babies. We dunk everybody.
Right.
We're just like,
That's
get
right.
in there.
That's right.
I always joke with my friends that if I baptize them, if I ever become a priest, I'm going to just go in the name of the Father. And then they're like, well, what about in the name of the Son? I'm like, oh, I'm still getting there. While they're underwater going like, oh, I'm like, hold on, got to get the devil out of them. Got to get the sin off.
There's a large Greek community here in Corpus Christi.
I've been there. My girlfriend actually goes there. Yeah.
Okay. Really? So I toured the church and I got to meet one of the priests. Is that what they're called?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's married. I mean, it was I got to learn a lot about. So, well, that's really good. So
I met him. Yes. I met him maybe it was a week ago. He seems like a really nice guy.
Yeah, it was a good tour. I don't know if he was married, but it's a young guy that just came from Colorado. But it was a very good tour. And let me just, again, let me ask both of you guys this. One line of argumentation that, because I know he's going to press on the time statements. But I guess one question that I had asked Don that I don't think this has been explored is that I think that full preterists contextualize everything that's said. So it just can be referring to that audience right there. So what I was trying to press Don on some is to say, okay, well, if we do that, then the gospel, that's being offered to Nicodemus, if you take it far enough, you could say, well, he was just offering it to Nicodemus. I probably need to work that out a little bit, but let me ask you, how would Don deal with John 3:16? What world is would he say is being referred to there? You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, he likely will say, like Gary DeMar says, that it's not about the cosmos, it's not about the universe, it's about the Judeo-Roman world, and that's not what it's about. The Greek does not ever support that. Like they would say he would probably say it doesn't. Well, for audience relevance purposes, he might say that it doesn't apply to us, but then again, he might say it does apply to us because he's pulling out of both ends there. So
okay.
But if I was a full preterist and I'm consistent though about it. So I would be saying, yeah, it's the world. Like it's supposed to be the universe. So
the principle of audience relevance,
that's
this is what a lot of people don't understand, is everybody at some level. Okay, so you could have an inclusive audience or an exclusive audience. So if it were exclusive, then everything that Christ spoke pertained only to those particular persons who were addressed. But nobody interprets the texts that way. Right. We all read, we all have some kind of transcendent, group that we're looking at. So the way I always have looked at it is, the generation in the first century was being gathered out by Christ as a representative generation, just like the generation under Moses was a representative generation, standing as the head of Old Covenant Israel. So you have Christ calling out a new generation, standing as the head of a new or a prospective new Israel. So it's a representative generation. Now, everything spoke to that generation is going to be spoken of within the compass of that generation. Doesn't mean it's that small, but it's in a restricted compass because it's a representative generation. So things like time texts, things like, audience relevance, yes, they pertain to that particular generation, but then the generation itself is representative of the entire church. Just like, if you remember the revival under Josiah, when they found the book of the law, they were doing some repairs, and they found the book of the law and the Torah, and they read him the book of the law, and he rent his clothes, and he's like, we've got to repent. We have sinned. Well, nobody told Josiah, hey, that was just written to the generation in the wilderness. They understood that there was that principle of constitutionality. So they were a representative generation, but everything that generation was instructed pertains to the entire nation. So unless you understand that transcendental principle, you're not going to be able to interpret the text. It looks like it was just to them.
Yeah.
But the representative principle is really important. That's how I look at the text. And that's really the only logical, reasonable, rational, and theological way to view the text, in my opinion.
I agree. So my question then is, where is the gospel? And I could never get him to answer this.
They won't.
What gospel is offered to Don? Like, where does he find the gospel anywhere? Like,
well, it's the gospel of prosperity when you sell a book, and I'm being.
No, I understand what you're saying, but
Revelation 21, that's his gospel. Those outside the city are the ones who didn't receive the gospel. And then I guess the people who are in the city, the problem with that though is the city comes down to earth. So all you can interpret it as is a condition of things in this world. It doesn't have anything to do with eternity, in my opinion. This is a condition where the city comes down to earth, comes down to be with men. There's sinners outside the city, but you could say that about this community here. There's sinners that have not entered into the blessings of the gospel, but that doesn't have anything to do with eternity. No. So it's not people still sinning and fornicating and adultering in eternity. It's still not a valid argument. It does not at all dismiss universalism from the table, because according to the universalists, Christ died for all men. He already paid the sin debt. So even though you may not accept Christ in this life, you die. Doesn't matter who you are. You go to heaven because he paid the sin debt. Only futurism and only orthodoxy can answer that objection to where, okay, at the end of history, the distinction is made, the division is made, and then that's it. There can't be any reparations, can't be any any salvation after that.
All right. I have another question. Go ahead, Lance. I'm sorry.
My biggest advice too is when it comes to time text and audience relevance, like stick them to it, because at the end of the day, they're not going to be able to apply it to themselves. And it'll eventually they're going to have to go, okay, well, if I interpret it in this manner and I have to say that, Milo and all these other words, like they mean this and it only means this. Like, okay, I'm going to hold you to it, Don, or anybody. Like, I'm going to hold you to it. So now what? How does this apply to your life?
Yeah.
Like, how are you part of this? How are you part of that? And then they're going to have to be like, well, that only applies to the first century. And it's like, okay, well then you can't be saved. You can't be with Jesus. You like, none of this makes sense anyway. But
right. So yeah, that's good. I appreciate it. That's helpful. So what I was saying is true, is correct. Yeah. Okay. So I have another question. Where is this? Like, what dimension is this heaven? Or where? How do they?
It's got to be two-tiered. It's got to be. See, this is what they do. They make it historical up to AD 70, and then when you get to AD 70, they move the goalpost. So now, instead of having that everything that happened applied after AD 70 in historical sense was historical fulfillment up to AD 70.
Yeah.
And beyond that, it becomes individual fulfillment, and you get it at death. So there's a guy named Samuel Lee. Well, there's two Samuel Lees. There was one guy from Cambridge and there was another guy from Massachusetts. The guy from Massachusetts wrote a book called Eschatology in the 1850s, and I actually have it back here. And he wrote that the coming of the Son of Man was AD 70. The coming of the Lord takes place at death. So it's a two-tiered thing. Historically, Christ was inaugurated into his kingdom in AD 70. Now what we're looking for in this age beyond AD 70 is vertical rather than horizontal fulfillment. So it's personal, individual. It's non-historical, except in the sense that God punishes and chastises people on a historical level the way he always has. But you're not looking for any more redemptive fulfillment in a historical sense beyond AD 70. What you're looking for is any moment, basically, you could die and you could meet the Lord that way. That's pretty much the system they're working. Now, some of them, like Ward Fenley, they will hold that historical fulfillment past AD 70, and they'll claim, well, we're in heaven now. We're in perfection now. We're sinless. I could do anything I want. But that is a minority, and I think Lance can attest to the minority opinion that's extremely minority. The more majority opinion is vertical, or actually horizontal to AD 70, vertical after AD 70.
Well, how do they get around the fact that they should be sinless then?
Oh, some of them don't. Some of them are like, oh, I'm going to go commit these things that used to be sin, but now they're not sin anymore because spiritual death ceased in 70 AD. Some of them say that. Now Don won't say that. Because he has to be like, well, Lance is evil, and so I can't because if I'm doing evil stuff and Don's like, Lance Conley is a vile human being, well, that means I'm a sinner, right?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, but like, if spiritual death ceased in 70 AD, why am I evil? What is God?
But what about marriage too?
Oh, some of them, you got into a good subject there, man. Like William Bell's into polygamy now. Some of them are like, hey, we can go do whatever we want with anybody, whatever we want, whenever we want. Animals. They're not saying animals, but that's another, implication that I've come to the conclusion of. If
the resurrection, we're, there's neither married nor given marriage. How do they get around it? Why do they even marry if we're there now?
Well,
what is their inconsistent response? How would they answer
just checking the
a lot of it's just going to be like, well, I'm a good old boy and I'm just not going to, I'm married because the government tells me I have to be married. And that's not even true anymore. But some of them will argue that, like, there's no good argument that they have, honestly. Like,
some of them actually divorce?
Oh yeah. One of them cheated on his wife and divorced, and then got with another person that was the best friend of his wife. And there's all sorts. It's like a good soap opera, honestly. Yeah. But I'm not gonna name their names, but like yeah, there's there's nasty stuff going on in some of those circles. Not necessarily Don's, but Don knows about it because some of them have been to his conferences. And Sam Frost can tell you this too. So I'm not
Yeah,
just
he was telling me, he was also saying like, the church, like, how do you, I guess none of them have, there's only like a couple of churches, right?
there's maybe like 10. I don't know. There's some that William Bell's trying to found in like Africa, I guess, to find more sister wives, I guess. I don't know. I'm being mean to William Bell because I just find him disgusting, honestly.
No, I did hear that. I did hear William Bell was, who did I hear this from? Or read something where I think it was you actually. Did you have some videos about it?
Yeah, I've been making.
I watched your videos. That's what it was. I watched all your videos in response to Don. Again, I thought I kept trying to figure out what's he talking about, like, because he was saying like you're vile and all these, I'm like, just because he disagrees with you, Don. I mean,
well, okay.
Another thing, Anthony, is a lot of them, they make sin a process which is conditioned entirely by law. So sin is not, there's no anthropological effects of sin according to them. And I actually had an IO person tell me this the other day, that sin is not anthropological in nature. It's solely conditioned upon the external precept of the law.
Yeah.
So you don't have sin unless there's an external precept. Now you take away that external precept, you no longer have sin. But this is the thing, Paul taught and Christ taught that sin is an inward, it's anthropological. So Paul, in being saved and in preaching the doctrines of salvation, wasn't just concerned about being released from an external precept, although that did have something to do with it. He was concerned about an experiential righteousness that was being worked out in his daily life. Now, the full preterists, a lot of them, not all of them, will ignore this principle, and then they will enforce this subjective notion of sin, which is simply based upon external precept. You take away that external precept, the law ends in AD 70, and that's where you get your righteousness from. It's not an experiential righteousness, it's a subjective righteousness. So they're subjectifying the work of salvation by by denying that experiential anthropological sort of dimension.
Yeah, Jason DaCosta shared that with me, and he's like, where there's no law, there's no sin. And I hear what you're saying.
I don't know if you know this, but Jason DaCosta once wrote a book, and Don Preston endorsed it and said he's one of the best full preterists I've ever met. Yeah. You should listen to everything that he has to say.
Yeah, I got his book. I got his book too on Amazon.
Yeah.
And again, and for making the case of he wrote well, but I think he still carries it too. I'm not sure, but I guess a few more questions. I really appreciate you guys answering.
No problem.
I haven't been. I had about two and a half hours with Michael Miano.
Okay.
Yeah, but back then I was just so like, what do you mean? I was just blown away by everything. Like, are you serious? But so some of the more specific things, I really appreciate you guys.
Not a problem, man. Anytime.
So
you as well.
Let me come back to this. How do they avoid Israel only? Like, how is that avoided in their system? I don't see how, and I would just like to know in preparation for Stacy.
I would say it has to do with the fact that, first of all, and Sam Frost made a good point a long time ago about the genealogies. So what the IO people try to do is they want to make Adam a Jew, which is not going to work any way you dice it.
Well, Don's going that way too, but I won't.
Right. So I think the genealogies are important. So the genealogies show that Adam was the ancestor of the line of Seth, right? So the line of Seth goes through Noah to Abraham to David, or to Moses to David. Okay, so we have genealogies, so we can show that the Jews were actually from Judah, and we can show that through genealogy that Adam has to be the first human being, or at least the first of existing human beings. Okay, so that's not to say that there couldn't have been, there's theories, but
Michael Miano denies that. It was a covenantal Genesis 1. Yeah.
Their problem is they've got to revise those early chapters of Genesis to match what they're teaching the fulfillment is. So when you get down to Revelation chapter 21 and you say, if you're just going to make it covenantal, you got to make the beginning covenantal too. So you've got to go back to early Genesis. You've got to make that allegorical. You've got to make that covenantal. That's what they're doing. It's out of necessity. It's not because that's what the Bible teaches or that's what the text says.
And
because they started with they came to their conclusions before they've examined all the evidence. So now they're trying to make everything fit.
Yeah, J.L. Vaughn and all them tried to create what's called covenant creation. You already know this, but yeah. So,
but it is, again, it does. I start to see, I could see where if you take this far enough, you do have to go to Genesis. And so I actually asked Michael, who's a nice guy. I mean, I'm praying. I'm praying for Don. I've even told Don, I've said, listen, I'm praying for you. You're getting older, Don. You need to repent of this.
Right.
And I mean, I'm serious. And so, and with Jason as well. And then even with Michael, I said, Michael, man, I think that Satan saw the potential and he has just got you derailed, man. But I asked him, I said, does anything in the Bible, does it mean anywhere like what it says?
Right.
Does anything mean anything what it says?
Nope.
And he and in all fairness basically was saying, well, no, I mean, it's not. It's got to be read in the light of covenantalism. And so right. So again, my question would be, how would someone, the standard full preterists, how do they avoid falling into Israel only?
I don't know, because that's what happened to me. I just eventually I was like, man, I can't make this make sense. Like, I'm studying I was being honest with myself and I was studying it and I was like, man, it really seems like Paul is saying that physical bodies rise from the grave and that this whole creation actually gets changed. And the more I studied Greek and Hebrew, I was like, damn it, it really does make that much sense. Like, now
so when you got to that point, that's what brought you out when you saw that conclusion. Okay.
Yeah. I kept like trying to make it work. And it was just like J.L. Vaughn wanted me to go covenant creation. So I was studying that. And then I was studying other stuff. And it just all culminated after that Rivers debate too, where it was just like, I can't dispute what Rivers is saying. Like I can dispute the like Jews or Gentiles argument. That's stupid. But like, I can't refute like this implication that, well, if the elect were elected in 70 AD, then like, that's it. Like, where are they going? They can't go to, and if Christ has stopped judging, if he's not the judge anymore of good and evil, where are you going? If you die, where are you going? Like, are you going to heaven or hell? Like, and I don't think actually, honestly, they need a purgatory state, because technically you can't go to heaven or hell if good or evil is not being judged anymore.
Right.
Because that ended in 70 AD. You know, so like, it just stuff started not adding up. And I finally was like, okay, well, Don can't answer me. I can't get a hold of King or anybody. Ed Stevens will like run away from me when I ask him this. So like, okay, I guess I got to quit and go.
And that's the same experience that Jason had shared in so many words with me, is that he came asking these questions and was getting no answers, no responses to them. Basically it was shut up. And that bothered me, man. I'm like, dude, whenever I'm going through a crisis of faith, I went through one for about 4 years, and, mentally just really, I can get pretty mental about these things. And I needed somebody that I could ask all kinds of crazy questions to.
Right.
And I could imagine someone just like Don's just saying, don't ask that. I'm not responding. How terrible is that?
Right.
Come on. I mean, so that's why I was reaching out to Jason. But,
I said the answer. I think the answer is systematic theology.
Sure.
The answer to because you can ask a lot of questions, and you can, somebody can tell you, well, this is what the text says, and bippity boppity boo. But unless you could show them the reason behind, why it is, for instance, the resurrection, why it is we're supposed to be waiting for Jesus Christ, because he died for us, his penal substitutionary atonement.
Yeah.
If he died in our place, well, that means we don't have to die. That means that we could be transformed at any time. So we should be waiting for his second coming. It all goes back to the cross. you could show people the reasons behind these doctrines. If they're right, if you're telling the truth, you're going to give them the reasons. If you're just spinning a theory, well, that's where you got to write your 800-page books. That's where you got to start killing trees. I can explain the gospel in 5 minutes. This guy over here is teaching full preterism. He needs a library to explain it, because he's got to change everything, reconfigure everything.
Well, so, another thing that's not going on in full preterism is they're not thinking about like the implications. They're not doing all that. They're just going like 70 AD. That's it. 70 AD. Like they're not going. They're like all of the rest of us would be like, hey, I'm going to read the Bible and I'm going to like try to answer some more questions with my theology. I'm gonna try to think more critically. If like, because there might be, and they don't do it. They're too busy. Like either they're not really, like they don't have the platform like Don has, or so they don't care so much. But if they're Don, they're like, oh, I don't care. I just want to make books. I just want to write books. And
well, guys, I really appreciate our conversation, but I've got church tonight, and can I pray with you before we go?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Father God, I just ask you, I thank you, Lord, for the time spent here with my brothers. And I just pray, Father, that we all get closer to the truth found in your word, Lord, and lived out according to the precepts of being a disciple of Christ. I thank you for my time and conversation here. I ask you to bless their families, bless their ministries. And we ask all this in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, you guys take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, have a good evening, sir.
You too.